Hello, and welcome to episode 113 of The Ethical Life, a place where each week we talk about the intersection of ethics and modern life. I'm Scott Rada, social media manager for Lee Enterprises, and as always, I am joined by Rick Kite, who is the head of the Ethics Institute at Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Hello, Rick.
Hi, Scott.
Health experts have said for years that excessive noise can lead to serious cardiovascular problems, but unlike other health risks, it's not a topic that's widely discussed. Rick, when you first suggested this topic, it wasn't really on my radar. But after preparing for this show, I can't help but think we should talk about this, in an appropriate volume, much more than we do. What can be done to make people think of excessive noise as much more than simply a nuisance?
I think the first thing is talking about it the same way we talk about things like air pollution. Just have a realistic discussion of the health risks, and we're getting more and more evidence that it's not just unwelcome, it's not just unpleasant. There's significant health effects because of the ways it affects our hormones.
And there's certainly a link to it, but the New York Times did a story recently, and it was a good story because not only did it talk about all the health effects and cardiovascular effects that this has, but it interspersed neighborhoods, sometimes in the city, sometimes in the country, with planes flying over or trains chugging by that really gave you a sense of what that neighborhood and what the people living there had to deal with all the time.
Yeah, and that story, I think, did a really nice job of describing, first of all, the kind of decibel levels that can start to have significant health effects. So, for example, if you're living with constant noise above 45 decibels, that's probably going to have some significant effect on your cardiovascular health. It turns out that about a third of the people in the United States live in places where they're regularly exposed to noises above 45 decibels. And the other thing is intermittent, very loud noises. So if you have, constant noise on the roadway, that's one thing. But if you have trains that go by with really excessive noise, or you live very close to an airport, something like that, it's much worse.
If you ask most people about this, it would just be an annoyance. And it is an annoyance for most people. But there's these health issues as well. And one of the things I was surprised to learn is these health issues continue on even while we're asleep. And I think we all know that good sleep is tremendously important to our well-being. And even though we may not be aware of it, people who live around those high noise areas can really see the effects of that.
Yeah, and I don't know if people that live in high noise areas oftentimes say they get used to it. And I wonder how much that is, does the brain become more accustomed to it so it kind of doesn't stimulate your flight response, which boosts the adrenaline, that sort of thing, which happens kind of automatically in the presence of loud noises. Does that lessen over time? I don't know. I can tell you that somebody who lives on a street that is fairly busy, especially in the morning and rush hour traffic times. We don't really have rush hour.
Yeah. I can see you were struggling with that term.
But it's not rush hour.
Afternoon commute.
Afternoon commute. I just don't like being on our porch, on the front side of the house at those times of day, because there is a kind of stress response you get. It's hard to relax and it's hard to focus on anything in the presence of constant traffic like that.
Well, and one thing, and you may have read more about this in preparation than I have, and I just wanted to see if you uncovered this, because it's something I didn't come across in my reading, is there a difference between what you just described, is that you're sitting on your porch or sitting in your living room or trying to sleep, and a plane buzzes over or a semi-truck drives by and disrupts that in an unexpected way, versus someone, we talked about a few weeks ago, I was at a playoff baseball game. It was really loud, but I was part of that. I mean, I was part of that, and I mean, at no point was I startled by this. I mean, there was a natural ebb and flow of the game. When somebody hits a home run, if it's on the home team, everybody gets excited, and all those things. And the other one I thought about was, and I'm absolutely not one of these people, but there are folks who drive around in those really loud motorcycles in the summertime with the deep engine noise. Now, we know both of those things. If you're around loud crowd noise all the time, that can affect your hearing. And we know that if you drive loud machinery, that can also affect your hearing. But I'm unclear if you're intentionally causing this, if that also has the same health effect, the cardiovascular health effects that a more passive response would be. Did you see anything about that?
No, I didn't see anything about that. And I thought it was in a way one of the weaknesses of the study we saw reported in the New York Times article is what if you're participating in the production of the sound, and is that different? And I would assume that it is. It seems to me, I mean, just gauging my own response, kind of stress response to different kinds of noises, it's very different when you're at a ball game and you're participating in it. Although there is a point at which your body seems to have just had too much. So right, like if you're at a ball game. Baseball games are interrupted occasionally by noise, but then it's a low hum. Football games and basketball games are more continuously noisy.
And in basketball, I would think even more so, because you're in a smaller, confined indoor space.
Right. And of course, concerts can be really loud.
Of course. Yes, absolutely.
And so, well, first of all, there's well-known dangers to hearing.
And that's something, we're not going to talk a lot about, but I think everybody's aware of that and has been for a while.
Yeah, and I've got hearing loss that's associated with noise. I was working around construction noises a lot when I was young, and in those days, not many people wore hearing protection. Hardly anybody did. And then I was hunting quite a bit as a young person without hearing protection. It just the awareness of loss of hearing and the dangers of different kinds of sounds and loss of hearing came, after I was grown. And so I pretty deliberate about wearing hearing protection, even, doing things like mowing the lawn or, those kinds of things, any power tools now. Your question about does it matter if you're interrupted? I think it does, because the way you respond to unwelcome interruptions or unexpected ones. I mean, there's a lot of noises that either startle you or keep you from being able to focus when you're trying to focus on a task. I would be really surprised if that doesn't stimulate some kind of stress response that we could call it participatory noise does not.
As I've mentioned, I learned a lot preparing for this show, and one term I had never heard before is the term noise camera. Those are also sometimes, and I would say more appropriately, called noise detectors. But these are things being put up in probably some cities across this country, but the one they point out here was in New York City. In this case, is being installed or these cameras or noise detectors are being installed in sort of the more wealthy neighborhoods, because there have been some complaints of car noise or other mischief on the street interrupting the people who live in these posh places. And I mean, I guess that's fine, but it does seem like this is something we should pay more attention to, everywhere, right?
Yeah, and Germany has noise laws, Rufezeit or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the term is, but they have regular hours every day when you can't use certain kinds of equipment, like leaf blowers or lawnmowers, and you do any of these things that produce certain levels of noise, that's pretty strictly enforced throughout Germany. I think there are a number of places in the United States that could use laws like that. That's why I dislike that noise camera in just certain kind of exclusive neighborhoods to rule that out. But I mean, I would appreciate in the neighborhood that I live in, I think generally the neighbors are pretty conscientious. But every once in a while, you'll have somebody, like at 7:30 on a Sunday morning, lawn service will come over to somebody's house, and they're getting an early start on the day. And it's really disruptive hearing lawnmowers and leaf blowers, across the street from you on what is normally a really peaceful time of day.
So there's all sorts of things I'm thinking about when you say that. I mean, first of all, that I would imagine if you looked into many, if not most, municipal codes in cities across this country, there are some sort of noise ordinances for, people who don't have a muffler on their vehicle, to super loud parties going on. And I think those are probably minimally enforced much of the time. Why is that? Well, I would imagine because almost every cop car has a radar gun, right? I mean, that's sort of like standard issue, I would imagine. They can check how fast you're going. Many have breathalyzers. But how many have noise detectors or devices that can measure the decibels of something? My guess is very few. So if you're a police officer and you're going to write a ticket for somebody who has a really loud muffler or somebody who's creating a really loud noise, you've got to be really sure, right? Or how is that going to hold up? Because if you have a radar gun and somebody's going 60 and a 35, well, that's pretty simple. But so I think that's a problem. So then I'm thinking, well, fine. Then, some departments can equip police cars with this tool. But then as the more I think about this is, do we really want another device to monitor what we're doing? And like you're saying, oh, well, maybe the neighbor's getting up at 7 a.m. and using the leaf blower to collect his fall leaves. I mean, that's not being a good neighbor, I would argue. But should that be like a law enforcement action? And I guess, I don't know, I'd be curious your thoughts on that, I guess, is the danger I can see here is, yes, this is, I think, from what the Times reported, and there's plenty of other documentation, that loud noises are a clear and present danger to the cardiovascular health of many Americans. I think that's true. I think it's true that we don't talk enough about it. But I guess what I'm unsure is, should we make this yet another thing we call the police about?
No, but here's why I like the German approach is not that people are calling the police all the time to enforce it. It's become a social norm. That is, and there are a lot of laws that function in this way. What they do is they set the social expectations. These are the times where it's appropriate to use lawnmowers and leaf blowers and snow blowers, all those really noisy things. These are the time it's not. And so then when my neighbor is like running a lawnmower way too early in the morning, I can go over to him, or somebody else can do it, just remind you realize what time it is, but not be at the point of having to file a noise complaint against them, right? That, I think, where we are right now is you are automatically pitted against your neighbors in filing these complaints against people, because we really don't have any shared understanding of what's excessive. And so I would like in neighborhoods at least some real clear guidance of and agreement on the importance of making our neighborhoods quieter.
Okay, but I'll give you an ethical dilemma around that. Yeah. So we both live in Wisconsin, and two things are true in wintertime. One, we get a lot of snow sometimes. And two, sometimes the sun in the morning doesn't come up until 7 o'clock, 7:15 in the darkest, deepest parts of the winter. And I'm also an early riser. And there are many times in the winter when I will be up before the sun is up. And if I look outside and, maybe I had the forecast that there'd be snow, I look outside, there's 4 or 5 inches of snow. For the last many years, I will have no hesitation firing up my pretty large snowblower. And we have a corner lot, but not only do I do our sidewalk, my kind of rule is that I continue down the block, the face of the block, until someone else is shoveled. And sometimes that means if I'm up early, I'll go all the way down. and I'll do that on the other side of the street we live on too, because I really don't. Once you get the snowblower going and you're properly attired, it's really not that bad of an experience, at least in my mind. So, and I feel like I'm doing a good service because people are going to get out and about soon. Our neighborhood is filled with people who walk their dogs, and I even had a neighbor who I don't know all that well a winter or two ago bring me a little care package before Christmas because he really appreciated that I cleared his sidewalk. But the neighbor next door to him may not appreciate it one bit because it's a gas-powered, kind of loud snowblower that I'm running at maybe 7:15 in the morning just as the sun is peeking over the clouds. So I guess, am I doing the right thing in your mind?
No, I think it's a judgment call, and this is hard. Lots of times I will end up waiting as long as I can to still do clear the snow and still get to work on time. Because that's lots of times the balance you have to make. I have a neighbor who regularly goes out and he will shovel because he's up like at 5 a.m, but he doesn't want to wake people up with the snowblower. So he won't snowblow until later, but he's out shoveling really early.
But he'll just do his walk or drive.
Then he'll just do his, sometimes
but I promise you,
if it's not real deep.
If my neighbors are listening, I will not be shoveling your walk, by the way. I may be snowblowing it, but I'm not bringing out the shovel.
But on the other hand, also winter is a time where everybody's got their windows closed, and snowblowers are loud, but it's not like it's not like lawnmowers and leaf blowers in the summer and fall when windows are open, and I think it's much more disruptive. So there is a difference there, and I think this is one of the things you kind of balance it with your neighbors. I would guess most of them really appreciate having you do that, even if it's a little bit noisy.
And I guess at this point I'll continue to do it. But I think that comes back to the kind of the question from earlier is that, and I don't know what my city's noise ordinance is. I could be breaking that possibly. Maybe I have no idea, but maybe it's before sunrise. You can't do such and such. Again, no idea. But that's where I guess I just get worried that we sometimes over-legislate these things, but at the same time, this is like an important public health issue. So that's just one of those situations where you sort of have to balance the people's health versus people's, ability to do what they want to do.
Here, so let me give you an example. So snowblowers, I'm not too worried about those. Lawnmowers really early in the morning or late in the evening, that bothers me because I think it's unnecessary.
And the timing of those, I guess people have work schedules, but you have a little more flexibility when you can mow.
You have more flexibility. Cars that have installed the really loud mufflers and motorcycles with really going by and revving them up on city streets, that really bothers me. And we have a young person who in our neighborhood who every morning drives his car to school and comes to a stop sign outside of our house and then floors it, and just an explosion of sound. And this is, like at 7:15 every morning. And it's just annoying. It's not the sort of thing that I'm really upset about. But when this sort of thing happens routinely, I would say that's just inconsiderate. It just, and it seems to me we have more of it, right? That's the other thing. Every year, it seems like population increases, but also we're just becoming a really noisy society. So we have to figure out some way of saying, how do we lower that a little bit? Because sound is one of these things that's known as a common good. Common goods are things that we can't possess independently. Like silence is a good. We say silence is golden or something like that. It's a good, but we can only have it through cooperation with one another. And so, how do we appropriately enhance or value a common good? That's what the challenge is with quiet.
I want to take this in a slightly different direction for just a moment. Again, not to make this all about me, but we've talked about in the past too, in the summertime, I like to be on my bicycle a lot. And there are a number of bike paths I go down regularly that are also filled full of pedestrians. And that's fine. I mean, I think it's important that they enjoy the path and that I enjoy the path. And I'd like to think I'm very considerate about getting past them. I'll tell you, though, if I'm approaching someone, if it's a 2 or 3 person group, I'm actually happier, even though they're taking up more space on the path, I'm happier than coming up against one person. Why is that? Because in every time you have 2 or 3 people together, you're almost assured that they don't have headphones in or earbuds, and you can say on your left, or you can ring your bell and they'll move out of the way and everything's fine. But if somebody's ahead of you, and oftentimes if they're by themselves, they may be jogging, or they just may be out for a walk, or may have their dog along. But if they're alone, they will more times than not have in these noise-canceling earbuds or headphones, and it can be difficult to get their attention. Now, the question is, obviously, again, we know if those people have their headphones turned up to 11, to borrow a phrase from the 70s, that we know there's some damage you can have to hearing and all that. We're setting that aside for right now. But what I'm curious, though, is if you're going down this path, and we'll just stipulate that it's a nice day and it's in a more rural area and you have birds and you have other ambient sounds of nature, are those people who have the earbuds in, maybe listening to this podcast, in fact, missing out in a way in sort of that nature around them? And is that like, I don't know. I just wonder if there's, probably not a health benefit, but is that just like, are they kind of cheating themselves on a full experience in nature?
Yes and no. I probably use earbuds when I'm out for walks about half the time, and lots of times, even when you're out in what you think of as nature, there's a lot of human sound.
Yeah.
There's noise from airplanes, from trains, from cars and trucks on highways that reach like pretty far into even areas that we would consider wilderness areas. And so it is a way of getting away from all of those kinds of sounds. There's a lot of like wildlife sounds. If you're really hiking out like in the wilderness somewhere, I would think you want to be immersed in it. You want to be listening to those sounds and to the animals around you. And then, as you point out, there's also the safety issue. And this is an issue if you're crossing city streets, you want to be aware of cars that are coming up, because we've been talking about noisy cars, but the other thing is cars have gotten a lot quieter.
Yeah, the electric cars, and that's going to, of course, become more. And some of them, I think, add in a little fake noise, if you will, right? So they actually do produce sort of a car-like sound.
Oh, is that right?
I think some have. I mean, I don't know,
producing it on the outside.
Yeah, there's like a speaker almost that's sort of like, that people associate with, oh, that might be a car.
So, and when lots of times when I'm wearing earbuds, I'll wear one, or they aren't noise canceling, they're noise isolating, but I'll wear them loosely and with the volume turned down at the lowest level where I can hear if it's an audiobook or a podcast where I can hear the talk, but where it doesn't cancel out the ambient sounds, because it's just not safe walking around without being aware of your surroundings. But I think that's a burden for the user, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think so. This kind of goes maybe to sort of the place I wanted to finish on here a little bit is we talked about the health dangers around these loud sounds that many of us are hear all the time and can't really tune out. And then we also talk about the importance when you are attempting to be in nature to kind of immerse yourself in that area. Recently, you spent a night, I think, in, I guess what I'll call the most rural part in the middle of our city. And I'll let you explain a little bit about sort of the geography of that region, and more importantly, what your experience was like doing that, because that's certainly something I've never done.
So we live on near the Mississippi River. Mississippi River goes right past La Crosse, and actually between La Crosse and La Crescent, which is a kind of a sister city on the other side of the river. And this part of the Mississippi River is called the Upper Mississippi National Wildlife Refuge. So the river weaves back and forth between 300-foot bluffs on each side. And in those spaces where the river meanders back and forth, there's all what we call backwaters. There's all kinds of side channels and also marshes. And we're in the fall now. It's waterfowl season. I've been a waterfowl hunter since I was 10 years old. And for the last several years, I've been going out on some nice evening in late September, early October, and spending the evening in the marsh before hunting the next morning.
So you're talking the evening or all night?
All night. So I'll go over in the late afternoon, evening, and I'll just I'll find a spot kind of close to where I want to be, and I'll just have a sleeping bag in the boat, and I usually take some kind of a tarp in case it rains, or even to protect against dew. We can have like really heavy dews this time of year, and so to put that over, and it's an amazing experience to watch the marsh kind of comes alive towards sunset. Wood ducks will be flying out of the woods because they come into the marsh where there's the wild rice beds. They'll come there to roost for the evening. So they'll have been feeding in the woods, feeding on acorns and things in the woods. You'll see them coming out in flocks just before sunset and coming all around and settling, and they're really noisy. And there's other ducks, mallards and teal and gadwall, that are coming. They all have their own sounds. And then there's a lot of other kind of shorebirds or marsh birds that are in the area. You have other like hawks and eagles that are gliding, especially the hawks will glide right over the top of the wild rice, and they're completely silent, but you'll suddenly see them just like 3-4 feet over your head, looking for food, usually I think injured coots or ducks. But
maybe you need to tell people what a coot is.
Coot is a kind of waterfowl that doesn't fly very well. It feeds mostly on wild rice, and they're in big flocks. They're also called mud hens.
Because when I said people, I kind of meant me.
Okay, so a coot or a mud hen, they're in big flocks. They have more of a beak than a bill. Okay. And they're one of those birds that when they take off from the water, their feet go, kind of propelling themselves, and their wingtips are hitting the water for probably like 100 feet. It takes them a long time to get up in the air. They're very easy to hunt. They're very numerous, and they don't taste very good. So not many people hunt them.
I've never been to a fine restaurant and seen coot on the menu.
No, I've met people who insist you can put them in a crock pot and put all kinds of seasoning on. But anything that has to be cooked for a long time with a lot of seasoning just to make it edible, that's not something you want to eat anyway. But I've been doing this for a number of years now. What I notice is every year you hear more noises of the city, and I'm in a place where I'm not real close to any highways or, airports or anything like that. But as the natural sounds of the marsh really increase around sunset, because you have all these birds coming in and they're making a lot of noise. As those sounds decrease, you start to notice once again all the sounds in the distance of truck tires, and there'll be sirens from an ambulance or a police car, and airplane noise. You'll hear car horns, usually not any human voices. It's really evident, and that goes on until sometime after 10 o'clock, it starts to quiet down, and by midnight, it's gotten pretty quiet again.
And you're probably sleeping by then, I would imagine.
Usually just getting to sleep about midnight. And you know how it's always hard to go to sleep in strange environments, like even in a hotel room lots of times. It might be hard to get to sleep. It's not what you're used to. It's even harder when you're laying down in the bottom of a boat.
I'll tell you, I have no problem sleeping in hotel rooms and places like that, but I can't imagine sleeping in the bottom of a and again, we need to let listeners know that we're not talking some deluxe fancy boat here. We're talking a very simple fishing boat, right?
It's a 12-foot wooden boat.
Yeah.
That's built for duck hunting. So it has a flat bottom floor on it. It's not like a fishing boat with benches or something like that. So I can spread out. It's just long enough for me.
But yeah, I can't imagine, and then realizing that I may at some point in the night need to unfurl a tarp on top of me. No, that would not make it a great experience to sleep, but having nothing to do with noise.
But it is, there is a real peacefulness to it. It's just that, two things. There are unexpected noises.
That's what I wouldn't like.
So yeah, like last week when I slept this year, there was just about a week ago, and I'm just settling down, just falling asleep, and there's this huge noise right by my head, just like an explosion.
So I imagine you packed up and went home.
I jumped up, I look around, and I see this little black shape about 10 feet away moving across the water. And I realized a beaver had come right up beside my boat and slapped its tail. And it was like a rocket going off. And so then that is one of the loud noises we talked about earlier in the show. It certainly, I had an adrenaline spike. Like that was not good for my health, hearing that beaver tail slap. So, and then even though I'm ready for it to happen again, it's still startling because, you don't know exactly when it's going to happen. And he would come about every 15, 20 minutes. He would swim up to my boat when I wasn't looking and slap his tail on the water and startle me. And then off he would swim again. And so he obviously didn't like my presence there. So there are these unexpected things that happen that you're just always kind of on the alert for, which keep you from getting a really good night's sleep. I usually get, 3-4 hours of sleep when I'm.
And it's not like your wife kicked you out of the house. This is something you choose to do.
It's really a beautiful evening. I mean, you've
not sold it.
I've not sold you. Yeah. So yeah, the sounds of the birds. I mean, so it is hard lots of times to hear. So you hear different kinds of waterfowl, and we're on a migration route, for millions of waterfowl that come through. I think it's about 8 million waterfowl or something that come through the upper Mississippi River flyway every year. And so there's these birds like widgeon that make a really interesting kind of whistle. And so you'll hear these around you. You can't see them, but you can hear them. There's gadwall. And so it's once you learn a little bit about what the different sounds are, what they mean, then you're just enveloped by it. And that's a really amazing experience that I know very few people take advantage of it, right?
I bet you were not having to fight for a place to park your boat that night.
No, I never have to worry about that. So, and I tell you what, there's all kinds of like great experiences that can be had in the world that nobody else is doing. And all you have to do is like take enough initiative to go do them because they're available to you and they're absolutely free.
Well, I'm sure that's true. I'm guessing you'll likely do this again next fall.
I'm looking forward to it.
You don't feel like you need to invite me.
Okay. I do tell you, like, I'm in my 60s now. I notice that it takes me longer to recover from a night where I'm cold like that.
Oh, yeah.
Don't get quite enough sleep. It used to be I would take a little nap the next day and I'd be ready to go. It wears me out for a couple days. So I am noticing those effects. So I wonder how many more years I'll be able to do it.
We end each show by tackling an ethical dilemma. Rick, what is your very timely question for me?
Well, Scott, in recognition of episode 113,
dun, dun, dun.
Let's say that you are checking into a large hotel and the clerk asks you if you are superstitious.
I would say no.
Okay, you would say no. And then the clerk says, good, you have room 1313. At that point, do you have second thoughts? Do you ask for a different room, or do you say, I really am not superstitious, I don't mind at all?
I'll tell you exactly what I would do. realizing that if any hotel that has 13 or more floors is not a small mom-pop motel. So I will assume that the person behind the front desk is not the proprietor of the motel.
Right.
However, I would tell him that even though it was not his decision, that I am very happy that whoever manages, built, and maintains this hotel is not an idiot and goes from floor 12 to 14, and that I am happy to be on floor 13. In the back of my mind, I might wonder, going back to our previous topic, if it might be quieter because there might be idiots in the world who chose not to be on floor 13. So part of me would be like, oh, maybe it'd be a little quieter at night, but that would not be my driving force. I find it ridiculous that cruise ships and hotels, office buildings routinely do this. And it's not like occasionally. I mean, I think the majority of them do this. I read somewhere
in America.
In America.
Right.
I think I read is Vancouver, Washington, by the way, outlawed this practice. Do you know why?
No.
Because, and I guess it's probably fine, is they were worried. I don't know if this was based just on an incident or just like preventative, but they were worried that if somebody said I'm in the 14th floor and I can't get out of and the building's on fire and I'm stuck, that it would confuse first responders, which, I mean, it could.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they outlawed that nonsense. And you know, geez, I'm usually reticent in saying we should have more laws, but that doesn't seem like the worst one. And I also read that sometimes, again, if you have those really tall, 60, 70, 80 story buildings, that oftentimes when they have to kind of periodically put in these like floors filled full of machinery or HVAC equipment or whatever, they'll often choose floor 13 to sort of, stuff that in so people don't have to have their office suite on the 13th floor. I find the whole thing ridiculous. Here's my theory on superstition.
Just a minute, Scott.
Go ahead.
You are a big-time baseball fan.
Well,
baseball is the most superstitious sport there is. So I'm a little bit surprised that you don't have a little bit of a superstitious bone in your body.
So you were kind of taking me down the road I was going.
Okay.
Because I think, and baseball is a good example, but I think much of our lives are this way, is that I think because so much of what we do, whether you're a baseball player or a university professor, is routine. That every morning you may wake up around the same time, and every morning you may do these things. And personally, there are many things in life I do that I sort of have routines around because I find it comforting to not every day have to make a choice about this. Like every day I don't want to decide if I'm going to have coffee waiting for me downstairs when I wake up, I'll just have it ready and I'll start it the night before. And that's just the routine I've created because I like coffee in the morning. It's convenient. It's just makes sense for me. And I think there's all sorts of things as humans we do, or as baseball players you do, because you're playing 162 games a year, that you build in these routines to your daily life. And I think it's also normal that if something, I wake up in the morning and there was a power outage and the coffee timer didn't kick in and I don't have coffee waiting for me, that's going to make me like a tiny bit miffed. Like, oh, well, I'm used to having coffee now. And so I think that because we naturally don't like interruptions in our routines, that is sort of where superstitions come from. That because and then later on that day, let's say I get an fender bender out on my way to work. Well, the reason that happened was because the coffee maker broke the night before. Or we kind of create these weird connections where there are no connections exist. But I just think most superstitions, and maybe I'm not thinking this through, but I think a lot of this just comes from disruption of routines that we like to have in our lives. So, but yeah, the 13 thing is nonsense, and every hotel, office building, and cruise ship should just get over that.
So you actually you would not only not want to change the room, you would really appreciate the fact that there is a room 1313.
I promise you, if I ever stay in room 1313, that will be a social media post I make.
Okay.
Like this might, of course, very tongue in cheek. This might be the last post you ever see from me because I'm about to spend the night in room 1313. Insert ghost emoji. I mean, Yeah, but I know there are people who would never do that. And I guess this also probably comes back, and this probably opens the discussion a whole lot wider than we want to go, but I'm also not a believer in supernatural things. Like, I don't think ghosts are real, and I don't think rooms can be haunted. And so here's an odd thing. I just got done telling you that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what Travis and I love to do when we're on vacation in cities? Go on haunted tours. Because what I found is, like, we were at one in Austin, Texas, and a few things are true. We've been on a number of these. New Orleans is filled full of them for reasons you understand. You usually get more interesting performative tour guides who like to have fun. So that's a good thing. And almost every time how these you kind of get to a place and they'll like give you history about this and here's what happened and like it's probably all true. And then like 90% of the way through the story they'll be and then one night and then they'll throw in some hocus pocus that you're kind of like, okay, well, whatever. But it's sort of fun. It's sort of like a performative experience. I don't believe any of that. I guarantee you there are many people who on these tours are like freaked out by this. And when we were in Austin, there's some old hotel, and I wish I could remember its name, but it was one of the biggest, most opulent hotels built in Austin in the 1800s, and is still in beautiful shape today. And because it's been around forever, people have died in rooms. And there was one young girl who died in her room. I think she fell down a staircase, if my memory's good. And so like people who stay in that room still today see or hear things, or I don't know what it is. And she's like, and the tour guy's like, how many people on this group, if given the chance, would want to stay in that room? If it were offered to you for free, because it was an expensive hotel. And like only a couple hands went up. I'm like, of course I would. I mean, I would have no hesitation to do any of that. And I think it's interesting to see other people's reaction about those things.
Well, and it's very likely room 10 or something like that. Like it's just as likely that the non-numbered 13 rooms are going to be haunted, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah. And I guess I could have looked into this further. I don't know the history of why 13 became this unlucky number. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to look for.
So, but again, this is, as you pointed out, episode 113. We did have, of course, by definition, an episode 13. I have no idea what that was about.
But this one also is going to be airing during Halloween. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be coming out a little before. It'll be coming out. Let me get my date here. October 25th. So just days before. So okay. Yeah, this will be that kind of almost our Halloween edition, and I guess. I mean, would you stay in floor 13 or room 13?
Well, this is based on a true story. This happened to me, and it startled me a little bit because I thought I'm really kind of surprised if you have to ask somebody if they want to stay in a room 1313. Why do you have a room numbered that way? Why not skip the number?
So they actually they did ask you this at the front desk. That's interesting.
Yeah. But he didn't ask me if I was okay with it. He just asked first, are you superstitious? And then when I said no, he said, good, then you're in room 1313. But I also realized that if he had not prefaced it that way, I would not have noticed. Yeah. I would have taken 13 and not thought about it. So,
but do you consider yourself to be a superstitious person?
No, but I'm agnostic regarding ghosts.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I haven't seen any ghosts. I haven't experienced any. My dad was pretty sure that he saw a ghost at my brother's house.
Okay.
I think he was probably confused. He was getting pretty old at the time. But he just thought, oh, that's just the ghost that lives in that guest room. He was pretty nonchalant about it. And I would put it this way, I'm not a believer in ghosts. I just think the world holds a lot of things that we don't know about. And so, like, the things that I don't know about, I just don't have an opinion about them.
So sticking on this is our Halloween edition. Before one kind of last question is, and I didn't know about this until a few years ago, but I had a friend who is from Minnesota, and he and someone else drove all the way. It was, I think, West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, which is a long ways, long drive, to stay the night at this former mental hospital, which has been turned into a tourist attraction because of its, what it calls very hauntedness. And and obviously you don't go there to sleep. You go there to kind of explore and do all and see what's all there. And you're with other people who are doing all this. Now, I think we will agree, you and I, that nobody likes to be walking down a dark hallway and unexpectedly have someone jump out and startle you. That's just is what it is, and that's always going to startle everybody all the time. But if you could be guaranteed that there's no what I'll call a jump scare, that you're just going to be in a big building that has, and I'm sure probably really bad things happen in these institutions 50, 100 years ago. I mean, no question at all. Would you have any hesitation spending the night in a place like that advertises itself to be, extremely haunted?
I would probably be more intimidated by sleeping in a marsh with a beaver swimming around by my head, worried that at any moment that beaver might just crawl up in my boat. I mean, now the haunted house part isn't going to bother me nearly as much.
I will 100% agree with you. I would spend a week in that institution in West Virginia because you mentioned beavers. I have spent enough time in this marsh that I know there are also snakes aplenty in this marsh, and I don't know if they're in the water and if they can make it into a boat, but I don't want to find out. So yeah, that's a really good point. That would be such an easy decision. Give me the institution every day of the week.
Okay, so this is our natural haunted podcast this time.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. The beaver really is like the scariest part of the whole show to me.
They have big teeth.
They do indeed. As a reminder, the Ethical Life podcast is a production of Lee Enterprises. Please subscribe to The Ethical Life on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, or on Spotify. And be sure to check out Rick's column where he talks even more about his night in the marsh. And that can be found on all Lee newspaper websites. For Rick Kite, I am Scott Rada. Thank you for joining us.
The Honda Ridgeline, Passport, and Pilot are in a league of their own when it comes to rugged capability. Their relentless power and versatility make these vehicles the ultimate challengers for exhilarating adventures and formidable terrain. But it's not just performance that makes these cars special. It's the unwavering determination that inspires everything we do. That's why we're KBB.com's best value brand of 2023.
Find the perfect Honda for you. See your local Honda dealer today.
Available all-wheel drive on Pilot based on 2023 brand image awards from Kelley Blue Book. Visit KBB.com for more information.